Hello, and welcome to She Leads Biotech, the podcast that celebrates women leaders in the bioscience space. I'm your host, Sharon Cox, CEO and Managing Director of CNA International, based right here in New York. And each week I'll be talking to women leaders about their work, their triumphs, and challenges, providing invaluable insight into how women can unlock their superpowers and succeed on their own terms. So whether you're navigating your own career path in bioscience or you're passionate about science and innovation, I hope you're empowered and inspired by each episode. Are you ready to discuss all things menopause? If you're late Gen X or an early millennial, this topic is a must for you. My guest today is a writer, creator, speaker, and passionate women's health advocate. Please welcome Timeless Biotech founder and CEO, Kiran Kumar. Kiran, hi.
Hi, Sharon. Thanks for having me.
Oh, listen, thank you for giving up the time. I really appreciate it. Where in the world are you at the moment?
I'm in San Diego, California.
Love San Diego. I keep saying, every show I think I've said, I love San Diego. So now this is just one more that I've done that too. So, well, listen, it's lovely to have you on. I was reading up on bits and pieces about you. There is a topic that I do want to get to. But before that, just talk to me about your background. So you've got a degree in biomedical engineering, is that right?
Close. It's biotechnology engineering. It's from UC San Diego. Took my blood, sweat, and tears to complete that one. But yeah, it's less about the engine, like the mechanics of building devices and medical devices, and more about like things like vaccines and actually biotechnology therapeutics.
Right. So what drew you to that? Did you kind of just wake up one morning, or were you a small child and said, "Oh my God, I need to be in this field"? How did you get to where you were?
It took a long journey. I never really knew what I wanted to do. I never made that association between what I was going to study being what I was going to do professionally in industry. That's something that I think a lot of teenagers have.
Yep.
But I was really strong in science and math. So I was considering engineering, but unlike basically every single engineer's story of how they just love machines and they like love everything machines, I don't love machines. If I need a machine, I will use a machine. But I don't have any specific adoration for like nuts and bolts.
Right.
For me, I really loved like the human body, and it was more than a fascination. It was just like a actual like empathy that I have for like our bodies, like even at the cellular level, they do so much for us. And even though I know our cells don't have cognition, they still deserve the best that we can give them. They don't have agency to give it to themselves. So that empathy led me to wanting to go towards something to do with the human body, which was different than medicine.
Yep. Okay. And you were recently back at your college for you were invited to be the guest student speaker, is that right?
Yes, so I was the student speaker for the Jacobs School of Engineering ring ceremony.
Okay.
I'm not sure if you're familiar with the ring ceremony, but it's actually a tradition that started in Canada. I am originally from Canada, so I've known about it for my whole life. Essentially, to prevent engineers from jumping to conclusions and making mistakes that can cost lives, they created the ceremony to let us know the responsibility of being an engineer. And
Oh,
then
wow.
we get our iron ring for it.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, it was
And
very interesting.
that's really good. And how many people are at that ceremony? How many is it?
Yeah, so there were 4,000 people in attendance. It was a full house, very exciting, and all of the engineering graduates received their iron ring. So there's lots of biotech engineers, electrical engineers, mechanical, the typical class.
And just out of curiosity, how many of those are women in that class?
UC San Diego has a pretty good ratio of men to women because engineering is usually very male dominated. I know
Mm,
in bioengineering, so all of our bioengineering streams, bioeng, biotech, bioinformatics, I'm pretty sure we have a 50-50 split, which is
fantastic.
very impressive. I had a lot of great friends who were women, other women in STEM, just struggling along. But we definitely have a better ratio in biotech than we have in some of the other facets of engineering.
Oh, excellent. So any women listening who want to get that kind of degree, get yourself to San Diego.
So that's a very good question. High school, I had a very interesting high school experience, but for me, I was very fortunate to be in an area where, like in my youth, there were a lot of like smart girls around me, and we inspired each other. But some things change. Even in high school for me, when you start to get into those upper level classes and like AP Calculus, AP Chemistry, you do start to see fewer women. And suddenly you have this sharp switch between like when everyone was in the class, you saw all these women who were top performers, but now that not everyone has to be in the class, you start to see more men, and
Right.
therefore, like many of the times, they are the top performers. So that's usually when you start to develop an imposter syndrome. So, what I would advise to any girls who are in that phase where they're starting to see this switch, they're starting to see this dynamic change, they're getting a little less confident, their friends are not doing what they're doing in STEM. I would say if you are going to have imposter syndrome in any field, choose biotech
Okay.
because no one knows anything. We are all imposters, you know, we did not create this. It's not like any other machine. So no one really knows everything. So if you're an imposter, that's totally normal. Everyone has a small amount of imposter syndrome when you're creating therapeutics or you're creating diagnostics, and it's
Yeah.
totally normal.
So you'd just be in a room of imposters,
Yes,
all of
exactly.
you. Excellent. Okay. So you're also a very accomplished writer. You've written, you're a science writer, you do content writing. That usually, to me, when I was reading it, I was thinking that's so like left and right brain. So, the maths and the calculus and everything is to me very left brain because I'm useless at it. And the writing, the right brain is more the creative and the writing. And you seem to have a good mix of the two.
Well, I don't know. I find it really interesting. I When I started scientific writing, I didn't think of it that way. I thought it was all about showing you know the most. But it took me a while, like it usually takes people in a profession to really understand the value of what you're doing. And that's when I realized it's all about making things approachable. And it's all about explaining things deeper without losing your audience.
Yep.
Um, I find scientific writing usually has a bad reputation for trying to sound like as pretentious or as complicated as possible. But I started moving away from that and moving towards things like analogies, but you still like explained the science because sometimes all we know are the analogies and we don't actually know what things mean. So I've gone down a whole like journey in scientific writing where it's become less and less like mathy and sciency and more like an art and a craft. Like I know lots of people say this, but it genuinely is a craft.
Yep.
I sometimes beat my head against like walls so many times because I want people to read this sentence or read this paragraph and feel like, oh my god, that finally makes sense, even though it never made sense for so many years. Because I love it when that happens.
Right.
So, yes, scientific writing, blogs, lots of longevity companies, lots of skin companies, like cosmetics as well. Something that I'm very familiar with.
Excellent. And then, as if that isn't enough, um, you're also the founder and CEO of Timeless. Is that right?
Yes, that is my baby.
That's your baby. Talk to me about your baby. Show off about
Yes.
your baby.
Yes. I'll I'll talk to you about my baby. So, Timeless never was meant to be a company. I have started like nonprofits and projects and like companies in the past, mostly like in Canada. But this one was not meant to be a company. It was actually just a project. I joined a hackathon that was focused on longevity called Launch Hack. And I wanted to produce something that took into account hormone levels because my mother was going through menopause, and I felt that health span is getting bigger and bigger in longevity. More people are focusing on living healthier longer. And so many women, even though they outlive men, so they're winning the longevity race, they're actually spending more years in diseased states.
Right.
So that's why I wanted to create something that gives us more insight on reproductive longevity, because that's strongly associated with like good health in females and also in males. However, what I realized is what we were trying to build, like a reproductive clock that kind of would tell you where you are in your reproductive lifespan, the same way we have biological clocks that tells you your cellular age, your biological age,
Yeah.
was way too granular. We were not there yet. Like, we did not even have a tool that could adequately predict menopause. So how could you ever hope to predict like a granular level of where you are in this reproductive lifespan without having that final prediction? So it became a menopause predicting clock. We kind of were walking ourselves back until we had something that was actually feasible. And we ended up prototyping the first ever time to menopause predictor that used just one blood test, and key hormones that are already typically recorded for ovarian health and to measure ovarian reserve, and to create an actual time to menopause prediction. That was very exciting, obviously. And I just ended up going to like one summit called Nucleate, which was happening in San Diego, because I just generally tend to go to these summits. I like to hear what people in industry are talking about, especially when I was in school. I wanted to make sure I still had my, foot in that industry, like corporate
Yeah.
investing world. And I ended up just bringing it up because we had created this prototype and it was like very exciting. And people were trying to invest. Like, people were asking if this is something they'd be able to invest in. And for the longest time, before we had actual like proof of concept where we were comfortable accepting funding, we had to like turn down offers. So now that we have that project and we're building out our financial models, we're building out our team to make sure we have that long-term goal of what we're going to do long term. We are going to start in like fundraising soon. Also, when things get better in industry.
Yeah, and it's clearly something that you're passionate about. I mean,
Yes.
and as I think as women, we should all be passionate about menopause and perimenopause and all of those things. And so many of my friends who are just like, oh, dreading the whole moment is actually with what you're looking to achieve.
Mm-hmm.
Is that something? And you're the expert, not me, but I would see this as something that if you have a rough idea
Uh-huh.
of when, or you have an idea when the menopause was going to hit you, and therefore what the bit is before that, and that you can plan for it, prepare for it. I mean, as
Yes.
much as you can, but it is all very. I know when I was going through it myself, it's like, am I? Am I not? I don't know. Could I be? And or am I just being a bitch as usual? Is there no difference? But it would have been nice to have got a little bit more clarity on it. Is that what you're aiming for?
Well, the last thing we want to be is a doomsday clock.
Right.
And the reason we need something like a predictor in menopause is not only medical. Well, the medical reason is more in terms of the fact that you have to start treatment, and if you want to use treatment, or you have to start supplementation before you actually have experienced menopause.
Right.
So perimenopause, the phase before menopause, can start 7 to 10 years before the menopausal transition.
Okay.
So it doesn't make sense to diagnose menopause retroactively. It makes more sense to predict it so women can prepare, identify the symptoms they're going to experience, and when they experience them, like you did, instead of thinking, is this just me being grumpy? They actually say, no, because I'm experiencing hot flashes, or I'm experiencing tingling around my skin, or I'm getting like itchy ears. They'll actually be able to pinpoint those symptoms. So that's like the medical reason of why you need something proactive. But it's beyond that, because many women have this either very daunting opinion of menopause in terms
Yep.
of what it means socially,
Yep.
or they have a very like non-medical opinion of it. They don't see it as something that they actually would have to go to a doctor for, or something that they would have to get addressed. So we're not trying, we want to make sure we help women prepare for the transition by A, letting them know that this does not have to be difficult. This does not have to be harmful. There are tools available to them. Your mental opinion of menopause can actually significantly affect your menopausal transition. So we want to help women reshape that opinion and actually not look at this with some huge sense of fear, but look at it with actual data, facts, statistics of how they can support their health, how can they support their mental health,
Yep.
and all of their relationships that may be affected if they don't know what's going on. So that's why we're going to give like lifestyle recommendations, just general education on menopause, what to expect, what are the symptoms, know when you're experiencing the symptoms. If you know when you're experiencing the symptoms, I'm saying this right now, you might not even need our tool. Because genuinely, if you know what you're looking for, if you start experiencing perimenopausal symptoms and you go into your doctor and you have the facts and you advocate for yourself, because your doctor, chances are statistically, they're not going to listen to you unless you advocate for yourself. And you know what type of progesterone, what type of estrogens to use, whether you want to use bioidentical hormones, how to use them topically, vaginally, orally, what's best for you, what's your medical history. You're fine, you don't need us. But most women are not in that boat. So
Yep.
that's why they need to initially get that sense of when they're going to experience menopause, what are the symptoms that can help them really know like when they should go into their general practitioner and how to advocate for themselves.
But the symptoms are so they're so vast. I mean, I know, again, for myself, because I'm old, I was, almost, when are the hot flashes coming? When is this going to happen? And I didn't have any hot flashes at all. Um, the one area, and I thought I had arthritis because all my joints just like hurt in my hands and everything hurt. And so I went to the doctor for thinking that I'd got arthritis. I'm far too young to have arthritis. What is going on? And the doctor said, "Oh, that's a symptom of menopause." And I said, "But I had no idea of that. I'm sitting around waiting to fan myself or open the windows or put the aircon on or something, and that wasn't. So there's such a range. How do women educate themselves on all the different what it could be and what it all of the different options?
Yeah, so there are 34 major symptoms of menopause.
34.
Yes, there are
Really?
34. Yes.
We
And
should print a book. We should get a book out there for.
there's a really good book if you are looking for one, which is The New Pause, which is by Dr. Mary Claire, which I highly recommend.
All right. Well, it's a bit
Um,
late for me, but it might help other people.
yeah, if other people are listening and you're curious, it's a good book to pick
Absolutely.
up.
Yeah, get that book.
So, yes, there are 34 major symptoms, but one thing that you did mention is you didn't have hot flashes, which is very important to note because hot flashes is not usually the earliest symptom that many people experience. So, perimenopause, if you want to get into it, technically comes in stages. So,
Right.
there are primary symptoms that you're going to experience that are actually not like hot flashes are not included in that set, but you'll
Right.
see things like irregular periods. Now, for
Yep.
anyone with PCOS, like myself, yeah, I'm irregular periods, that's like something we faced our whole lives. So people don't usually note that down, but there are many other symptoms like even tasting things like your taste buds change.
Yep.
There's gum issues that lots of women experience primarily, like weakness in gums and lots of bleeding in gums. So just making sure you recognize those earlier symptoms, and those are the ones that really aren't hot flashes. Now, many women don't have hot flashes at all. But they will experience things like vaginal dryness. They'll experience things like completely non-existent sex drive, which
Yep.
both which heavily affects a relationship, and that's usually when they start to get really concerned. And many doctors, if the woman doesn't have hot flashes, won't offer them treatment,
Yep.
which can definitely be an issue. So you want to ensure that you're familiar with these symptoms, and it's not just enough by like searching up symptoms of menopause online. You want to get into the circles of like doctors like Dr. Mary Claire Aver, Dr. Vonda Wright. These women, like, they identify their latest research papers. Timeless Biotech, our Instagram also does. We identify the latest research papers. We break it down for you. We tell you the nuances because you deserve to know at a deep level what you're going to be experiencing.
Yeah. And it's interesting, isn't it? Because the hot flash is the first one. When you speak to anybody, well, anybody I speak to about, menopause, and they go, "Oh yes, I'm dreading those hot flashes." That's it. That's
Yeah.
basically what people say, and maybe they know about the potential vaginal dryness and about the potential lack of sex drive, but that's never discussed. There's never That's the bit that isn't really talked about, which is a shame, I think, isn't it? Because the danger is that women sit there, if they don't know, because they haven't spoken to other women about that, then they think, this must be me. It's obviously something which, as you mentioned, can cause serious relationship problems. Is
Yes.
that something that you advocate for? How do we all talk about this now? How do women have more of these conversations, or what can we do to help that happen?
It's difficult to try to get individuals to change their behavior because they have completely like valid reasons. That's
Sure.
how they were raised. That's what they're comfortable with. And even if we can provide like best practices, which are always there, when a woman is going through like perimenopause or menopause, sometimes her life is like totally uprooted. And in many of these cases, it's difficult to tell them, well, technically, if you eat better, technically, if you start exercising more, it's like this woman is exhausted. Like, fatigue is a huge issue associated with
Yeah.
menopause and perimenopause. Like, she does not have the muscle mass she had. She does not have the bone she had. She does not have the brain she had. The brain fog is also a huge thing associated with menopause. And that's why it's so important to provide her with the options of medical interventions or
Yeah.
like lifestyle interventions that don't require as much of her to start something, because these women have lived a whole lives they like life they've kept up, like a huge thing is weight gain. They've kept off the weight their whole lives, and then
Yeah.
suddenly they start gaining this visceral fat with no
Yeah.
changes in their diet. They go into the doctor tells them to lose weight, and suddenly she feels like she's being abandoned by the medical industry because
Right.
she's like, I've done this my whole life, but now I'm telling you this is not me. Like, this
Yeah.
is not like in my control. So that's why I think it's really important for women to know that this is something that's happening to them. It's something that is way more difficult than something they would have otherwise experienced, just like fatigue in general. This is something
Yep.
that's happening at the physiological level. And I think one thing that's important to communicate to women who are not really seeing things as more than hot flashes, or they're not really open to communicating these things, is the long term health effects of all of these things. Like when you talk about joint pains, that's typically because that's associated with menopause, but because osteoarthritis, like osteoporosis, dementia, heart disease, the number one killer of women in the United States, these are all associated with the decline of estrogen in the body. Estrogen has a lot of protective effects and a lot of important effects on women. So especially when we have other nutritional imbalances, which are very common in with our diets these days, just like the soil is eroded, like all these different things that lead to us having these nutritional deficiencies. That now, when we lose that estrogen, basically no part of our body is left unaffected.
Mm.
So that's when you start to actually experience these long-term health effects. So it's not just about those symptoms that you can experience for 7 to 10 years or more. It's about all of those long-term health effects that women need to be more educated about. You don't just get past perimenopause and menopause and then
Right. Yeah.
unfortunately it's not fine. You lose a lot of bone density, you lose a lot of muscle mass.
And what is the difference here in the US? I've found women that I've spoken to when I've talked about HRT,
Mm-hmm.
and that they almost saying, well, that it's not really available here. It's not. When I went through menopause, I still lived in the UK, and I was in my early 50s, I think, when sort of full menopause, and when once I got my joint problem, and the doctor was just like, okay, that's cool. Let's put you straight on HRT. Which one do you want? And we did some trial and error of whether it was, the patches or whether it was the pills or whatever it was. But oh my God, like within weeks, I don't even think it was a full month. I just felt I just felt like me again. And I was like, I'm never, ever, ever coming off this, which of course you do have to. But when I moved here to the US, it wasn't available. Is that, I mean, I've been here 8 years now, so it may well have changed, but is it something that there are medical interventions available for women?
There definitely there's definitely medical interventions available for women. So the issue we have here in the US is there was a paper that came out many years ago, and I don't want to talk about this study. It's very, like, you can clearly find it online,
Okay.
that talked about, that basically scared lots of women off of HRT. And it talked about how they had said that it causes cancer, and there's a lot of risks associated with it.
They did the
But
same in the UK. Yeah, it was the
yeah,
same one.
so lots of that has lasted. Like the fear that HRT will cause like uterine cancer, even though when used with progesterone, that's not true at all. Or breast cancer is a big conversation with HRT. However, a woman with breast cancer's number one cause of death is heart disease.
Yep.
So you really want to make sure that you're giving the patient all the information they need to make this decision. Um, Another thing is lots of people are just not keeping up with the science. So HRT back then is not the same as the HRT options available now. So you have topical estrogens and progesterone. You have vaginal estrogen and progesterone. So when many people talk about increasing risk of heart disease, if you look at the research papers, that's oral estrogen. Topical estrogen and progesterone significantly reduces all-cause mortality, including heart disease,
Right.
cardiovascular disease, death, including women who are 65 plus. So this is another thing, the idea that women can only be on HRT or menopausal hormone therapy, MHT, for like 10 years after they're entered menopause.
Yep.
Which actually, if you're taking the correct like dosage, you're taking the correct estrogen and progesterone, like you're taking it topically or you're taking it vaginally, that doesn't necessarily have to be true, because we see an overall reduction in all-cause mortality and improvement in quality of life for women 65 plus who take HRT or MHT.
Right. I know where I'm going tomorrow. So my next question, what follows? So you have the perimenopause, you have menopause, you've gone through menopause. What follows that women could still learn about, that they perhaps just accept as, okay, I'm getting old now, so I just have to accept that. Those of us who don't want to accept that, is there something else?
Yeah, so you have perimenopause, then you have like the stages within it. Then you have menopause, which is technically like your final menstrual period.
Right.
You are that, like, you never really in menopause as much as you're in perimenopause and then postmenopause. So
Okay.
yeah, it's kind of like the switch from peri to post, where
Right.
now you have had your final menstrual period.
Right.
So that's the many women are still on, if they were offered HRT, like many women were never offered HRT, like, which I don't want to get into, like
That's another topic.
yeah, the medical bias. Like 75% of women who seek medical attention for menopause with like for their symptoms are left untreated. So it's definitely a huge issue. But for the women who do go on MHT, lots of them do find that they're back to their own selves. They don't want to go off it. And they stay on it for 10 years, but then their doctors kind of tell them, okay, see, now the risks outweigh the benefits, so we're going to take you off of this. And in some cases, if they're on like an oral HRT, this might be true if they have like a history of breast cancer. That's totally up to them, and if they're like, if they would like to get off of it, that's totally up to them. But then they start to experience like those increased risks of osteoporosis, fractures, like these bones start deteriorating very fast, muscle starts deteriorating very fast. Now the
Yep.
reason I keep emphasizing muscle is because so many women experience musculoskeletal symptoms of menopause. Actually, like 70% of women experience it, and 25% get disabled over the course of the transition. So, bone health and muscle health are very, very important, especially when it comes to longevity or health span, where we look at frailty being like one of the number one main indicators of if you're like, if you are not going to have a good quality of life, or if you're unhealthy, or
Yep.
you're going to have a bad health span.
Right.
So when you want to prevent frailty, you also want to keep your brain healthy. All of these key things that women typically want to stay healthy or stay independent in their later years of life
Yep.
are supported by MHT. So when women are taken off MHT for supposed risks when they just haven't been introduced to better forms like vaginal or topical estrogen, or like bioidentical hormones, which are basically hormones that supposedly are easier recognized by our body, then they start to increase their risks for those again.
Right. Very interesting. Very interesting. And it's something you're definitely very passionate about. And I
Yes.
read an article, was something like that you posted. 6,000 women a day in the US under Gen X is entering into the menopause and perimenopausal phase. Is that correct?
Yes, so we're starting to see more Gen X women who are kind of a little irritated that the education wasn't there.
Right.
Um, and they're entering this transition with absolutely no idea what to do.
So the importance then really is is educating the millennials, because that's the
Yes.
next generation, right? And having them fully educated.
Yes, so that's something I have this conversation a lot because many times people tell me, Kiran, like why is Timeless Biotech so active on social media when like many menopausal women or postmenopausal women are like don't know the trends that you're sharing with, like they're not on TikTok, right?
Yep.
But I say, well, you're forgetting that my target market is not menopausal and postmenopausal women. We are trying to reach women who are premenopausal and
Yep.
educate them in advance.
Right.
So that's why we want to ensure we're educating the younger populations, because all of the negative things that I basically said about all of these things associated with the menopausal transition, how it increases all cause mortality and all of these other issues like increasing frailty, that's very easily fixed by education, and if the woman is interested, treatments like menopausal hormone therapy. So that's why we really want to make sure we're catching them early so they don't go down this deteriorative spiral before knowing what could have actually helped them.
And so therefore what we started the conversation with, in that women are outliving men but not necessarily with a better quality of life,
Yes.
that's by the generation now, of reaching that generation is really how, that the what would it be, 20 years time, where the reality of fit healthy women having a longer lifespan than men, but being healthy.
Yes, yeah.
That's
So
what we're aiming for, right?
yeah, exactly. It's so many people are saying this now, and I just really want to emphasize it. It's muscle. Many people consider it like the organ of longevity. I know Dr. Gabriel Lyon talks a lot about the importance of muscle for overall longevity and health. And the one of the main issues is when women do start to lose like or gain weight, gain visceral fat during this transition, and they're told to lose weight and eat less, they lose a lot more muscle.
Muscle. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's really important to get that muscle back. And there's so many great ways to do that. Like I've started taking creatine. That's a great way to do it. There's also like urolithin A is something that's very interesting, which can actually help you build muscle without actually and build muscle and build endurance without actually increasing your amount of exercise, and that's through mitochondrial health. But there are lots of things that women have historically not been told to look into, which is building muscle and focusing more on having strong bones and having strong muscles instead of just being slim and having a lower number on the scale.
And that's the importance for you guys at Timeless. That's your mission, is to get this message out there, right?
This message, among others, so yes, the importance of building muscle, making sure you're eating enough protein in the right way, protecting your heart, protecting your brain through medical and non-medical intervention.
So what's the future for you? I mean, you're certainly not very old. I won't ask how old you are, but you're certainly not very old. Or you don't look very old, so you're obviously taking something that, if you are, that's amazing. You're a writer, you're a CEO, you do all these things. What looking forward for you? What do you see as your future?
My main dream and main goal is equality with the sexes, but differentiation between the sexes. And that's going to sound very confusing, but many people know exactly what I'm talking about, which is yes, we definitely want equal opportunity for both sexes, but that does not mean that women, especially in terms of health, need the exact same advice as men.
Yep.
So when we talk about many things to do with longevity, that's kind of being dominated by a lot of men. Like lots of advice towards like longevity has been geared towards what's better for men. And we haven't done a lot of research on what does that mean for women. Like we know about, and I don't even want to say longevity at this point. I'm going to solely focus on health span and
Yep.
how we can keep women healthy longer. And because of menopause and because of how menopause significantly changes women's quality of life, that's the main starting point. And by understanding what makes your menopausal experience more seamless or what makes your menopause experience less deteriorative, we can also understand women's hormones more. We can understand women's bodies more and understand what they need to stay healthy. For instance, high cortisol is obviously associated with a worse menopause transition, so high levels of stress. However, lots of women do, like I used to do, high intensity interval training workouts. I used to do a lot of workouts that stopped my period from happening for like months. And they also led to lasting hormone imbalance and a high cortisol system that I'm still dealing with those issues. And many women have this experience because we follow this health advice that is aligned for men. All men are recommended to do these high intensity interval training workouts, but that's not necessarily better for women with
Women.
cortisol systems. So it's about specifying that advice, personalizing that advice. What's good for hormonal health? What's good for our overall health? And understanding menopause is basically allowing us to also address how women can prepare through balancing their hormones.
Right. Excellent. So finally, I'm very conscious of your time. I know how much you've given us already. To women out there looking to enter, to become a CEO, to be an entrepreneur, what piece of advice would you give to them?
Yeah, so for women who are, like I said, interested in biotech but have that imposter syndrome, first thing I'll just reemphasize is when it comes to things like biology, no one knows everything. So everyone is an imposter in everything but that one thing that they're a specialist in. So that's one thing that I will definitely say. The other thing is the importance of understanding where change starts. It's not just about power in when it comes to the entrepreneurial space or the startup space. It's about what is changing or what contextualizes everything else in the system. So get on Twitter, get on Twitter, follow like VCs who invest in life science, follow VCs who invest in biotech, women's health, and follow what they're saying. Follow these trends because even if you don't want to be a CEO or an entrepreneur, whether these individuals are investing, whether they're deploying cash, what are some of the issues they're seeing in these companies will contextualize a lot of what's going on, even when you're not at the top of the company. So that's something I would say, like, get in those circles, get on those newsletters, like Femtech Insider, FemHealth Insights. These are great newsletters. Get on Twitter, follow these VCs, because this advice will definitely give you context in your journey as in biotech and life science. And yeah, you'll be able to use that information meaningfully.
And to be able to make decisions as to whether that is a journey that you want to take or
Oh,
not.
absolutely. Yes, it's not for everyone.
Yeah, I can imagine. Well, listen, it's certainly for you at the moment. I can just feel your passion coming through the screen for what you do, and thank you. You certainly educated me today in some areas, and hopefully other people that are listening that will be inspired by what you're saying. And I really thank you. I look forward to following the success of Timeless, and I wish you every success in the future.
Thank you so much, Sharon. It was really fun talking to you.
It's a pleasure. Well, that's it for today's episode. Thank you so much for listening. She Leads Biotech is brought to you by CNA International USA, a woman-owned boutique search firm based in New York. If you're looking to hire talent for your company or want support in achieving your career goals, please reach out to me at contact@cnaint.com. I hope you enjoyed this conversation. And remember, the success of every woman should be an inspiration to another. So don't be afraid to share yours. Thanks again for listening. Until next time.